Hello, welcome back to Ben Sushi Live Noding. Let's continue with our Armory game engine explorations in Blender. So again, I'm starting to get used to Blender 2.8 environment. It's still beta, and also Armory is still kind of I think it's continuously being developed, but it's already pretty solid kind of environment to work with. So yeah, let's see what we have today. This is basically another like a trigger mechanism that kind of basic, and you can do this with Blender game engine in the past. You can use Unity, Unreal to do something similar. You can see the logic nodes up here. The nodes actually very simple. Let's see what it does first. I'm just gonna hit play, so it's gonna execute the game engine, and now we can see the game. So if I actually left mouse button, you can see the ball is kind of moving forward, and if I right click, it's gonna move backward. And you can see Susan head. It's politely kind of move up to avoid the balls. So what's actually going on is the mechanism that we have here that I will explain later. So we have the player, which is this red ball, and we have some kind of a volume, represented by this volume mesh, and we have Suzanne inside it. So basically, the volume is kind of like a trigger mechanism. If the player, if this guy actually kind of moving toward Suzanne and goes inside the volume, it's gonna trigger and tell Suzanne head to actually move up. And then as the player actually leaves or get kind of outside of the volume, Suzanne will actually goes back to the origin. Yeah, so this is very simple. One thing I actually want to let you know is that you can use AWSD to move around with this inside this game engine. This is kind of like the default, and the left mouse button actually can kind of rotate. So I shouldn't actually give this control to left mouse button to avoid kind of a strange motion. But anyhow, let's close this. So let's look at the logic. So we have, like I said, we have three objects. The volume, which is this big box. The player, represented by this player right here. We see it as a sphere because I have this modifier, subsurf modifier, and this version of Blender 2.8 beta does not do the modifier on the 3D view, but soon as it gets updated, it's gonna do that. Let's look at the Armory nodes logic. So we have this mouse control on mouse left and right. We do the forward and backward. This is for our player, so it's only moving forward and backward. This one we have Suzanne. This is kind of like on initialized when the player being played, when the game is being played, just one time only on initialize. Suzanne will go to location 000. This first Suzanne head, and this one is actually the trigger. It's very basic, very simple. On volume trigger, this is the nodes that's responsible. On volume trigger, what's the volume? The volume is this guy. And if we actually create the event on volume trigger, this is very important. Volume, not like volume in sound, but it's more like volume, like a space trigger thing. So this is the player and the volume. So what's going to go inside the volume is the player, and what's the volume itself is this mesh. As it's enter or as it's leave, trigger the actions on Suzanne. Actions is like a Blender animation block. So I actually have action on Suzanne already. It either goes up or it goes down. It's just normal animations, but I just named the actions up and down. The blending will be, I think, the blend between the original position and the actual animations. And yeah, there's a lot of things here. There's a in and out, and that's not always very clear. But at least here, this is important. As the action is completed, just simply pause the action. So this is important. You're probably gonna be seeing it quite often. So in and out, I'm not like still not 100% sure, but this, at least when the action is done, then biologically you want to Suzanne to pause. So if we run this again, let's change the light, put the light over here. If you start using like PBR and HDR, the game engine actually looks quite nice. So see, while the player is still inside the volume, Suzanne simply just stop at that position, and as the player move out, Suzanne goes back. So you might have question like, what if we have like separate objects as a volume? What if we have like a multiple? That's also something that's I have I have in mind. So what happens if I just duplicate the objects? Will it work right away? So it's not gonna work right away. You need to perhaps do a couple of things. Although I have a feeling this is actually not 100% correct way to do it yet, because you're gonna have like, let's say you have 100 of Suzanne head and 100 of volume. That's not gonna be efficient. You need some kind of way so that it will always work no matter what and no matter how many objects you have. Here I'm just simply replacing this Suzanne with a new one as well as this volume. So we're gonna have a lot of nodes. This is not the efficient way to do it. Okay, don't follow this way, but I just wanna show it to you. What's the Suzanne head position currently? I think it's 5.7. Let me try. This is probably not gonna be behaving as we want it. There's a node, if I'm not wrong, there is a node called self, but we're gonna look at it later. Okay, so that's definitely wrong because the second Suzanne head, even though it's being triggered, so that's definitely the first Suzanne, okay, the one that's moving. And then there's the other Suzanne start to move as I goes into the second volume, but the animation seems to be the same. So we are using the same animations as the first Suzanne. I guess it could work if I get rid of the keyframe here, but on the X and Y, but it's not very efficient anyway. If I could find the self somewhere, it's possible to make it so that the whole setup is modular. That's still something I try to figure out. So instead of using like player or volume, it's gonna be like a self. So this is a way we can make this logic as modular, and we can just simply apply the same thing. So even like with the animations, currently the action itself, right? The action itself is like absolute. It's only like one actions for a single object. If it's just moving up and down or left and right, just like a door, it's probably kind of okay to use action like this. But in a game engine, I think with a game logic, it's everything. If everything is procedural and modular, it's gonna be it's the best, because we want to automate everything as much as possible. It's not easy, but even when you understand the simple concept like this, it's gonna be really cool. The next thing I also want to know is how we can record the whole thing. Maybe I should ask the Armory developer, or yeah, I'll ask at the forum. The idea is that I like to run the player, and then as it's running the game, I want to record everything, and yeah, it's and then maybe use it for animation, or I mean for storytelling if you want to render it out or something, or maybe like export it out as augmented reality kind of presentation. So there you go. Hopefully this one is useful. There's a lot of questions, but hopefully, maybe if you know anything about it, you can let me know in the comments below. If you have anything to add. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.